getting crepes.
We're gonna look at the menu.
morning, Mistress of Divination. Do you like green? Because it's one of my favorite colors. Hello, you love your blue shirt. Blue is a good color. I prefer green, of course, because I'm wearing it. But I am a Ravenclaw, so my robes were black and green. Are you taking the temperature? What is he doing with that thing, Sir Cadogan?
No.
No, he's not taking the temperature. I don't know what he's doing. He's holding this little thing, it's scaring me. It's not a wand. I don't know what it is.
stand by the night display.
They're all going to that one.
It's so nice it's not ridiculously crowded. I'll take this.
It's going there. Next show at 1:15.
Oh.